Alright, welcome back to the channel, everybody. I'm out on the RAD Span 5. We're cruising out at the Marine Creek Lake Trails. Hope you enjoy the views. Let's start off with thanking Dick Pritchett Real Estate for having these cams you get to watch, and let's get into the week. Start off with 5/21 Sunday. At 6:42 a.m., 22 comes to the nest tree. This is a pretty slow day. I just see him at the pond, drinking and bathing, and that's about it. We don't see him much that day. Of course, that's after that Saturday that he had pretty good feed. But we don't see him much on Sunday. That brings us to Monday, 5/22. At 6:31, 22 flies into the nest tree. He's just there briefly. Then at 1:30, they show him across the street, over in a pine tree, kind of in the neighborhood. And they've shown him there from time to time. We've seen him there in that tree. Then about 2:02, he returns to the nest tree. And then I see at around 11:10, I see M15 at the pond, but no 22. And then I just wanted to note that on this date, 22 is 135 days old. So at 7:05 p.m., M15 and 22 fly to the nest with a fish. 22 gets and eats. It's getting pestered a little bit by that mockingbird. M15 hits the pond after the delivery, and then M15 goes to the nest tree and kind of waits on 22 to finish the fish, and then 22 and Dad fly off. And they show M fly off towards the back of the pasture. And they've shown M a couple of times, actually 3 or 4 times, fly up into that cell tower. The closest one to the pasture and the nest tree that you can see from the nest cam when it's when it's pointed towards the back of the pasture. Although on this particular evening, 22 followed him up there, and you could see them both land up in the cell tower. And that's it for the evening. Brings us to Tuesday, 5:23. At 6:19, 22 flies into the nest tree. It's being a little vocal. He leaves for a while, and then he comes back at 11:19. But then he's there briefly and flies to the office oak. At 5:50, he flies to the nest with a piece of wood, and he's tearing that piece of wood up, and he's eating a little bit of it, and he's being a little vocal. This particular Tuesday, he was around the nest site most of the day. He did make some attempts at the pond to catch some fish. I did see him 15 on Tuesday, about just a little before 9 o'clock. He was at the pond drinking. But that was pretty much so it for the day. Didn't see any food deliveries. That brings us to Wednesday, 5:24. At 6:22, 22 flies to the nest tree. At 7:27 a.m., M15 and 22 return to the nest with a squirrel. 22 gets and eats. Both birds came from the office oak area. And then afterwards, 22 hits the pond and drinks some water. just kind of has his usual play day at the pond. Then at 1:45, it starts raining, and this is some good rain, and this is like the first day of a few days in a row that it rains. Then after the rain, we see 22 around the nest site, in and out. And that's about it for Wednesday. He went on Wednesday after the rain. He is kind of, just in the nest tree here and there, and around the pond, doing his little just playing around stuff. So, that brings us to Thursday, 5:25. At 6:31, 22 flies into the nest tree. And in the background, you can see this big crane being raised up into the air, and it's got, you couldn't tell, it looked like it had some kind of chaining hanging off of it. And 22's just up in the nest tree. I was thinking, what does he think about that crane being raised up in his area? He just sat there, and then in no time the crane was gone. They retracted it, and we didn't see it again. So at 11:30, M15 returned with a UFO, and it's a UFO because the camera never showed 22 in the nest. But 22 does fly in and gets and eats it, I'm sure. 22 hit the pond afterwards. Like I said, they never put a camera view on the nest. We have been getting a little bit of that too. Sometimes I don't think there's anybody there manning the cameras. So we got to rely on Cam 3 and kind of just see what's going on from afar. After he ate, he was in the attic perch for a while, and he hadn't been up there for a long time like he'd been. He was in the tree for a good long time on Thursday. And then he left for a while, and he came back to the nest tree. Then at 2:45, it started raining. He was in the attic. Briefly, I saw M15 or Intruder, one or the other, fly into the nest site area around 3:25. It stopped raining about 7 p.m. 22 was in the front right snag tree during the rain, and still there at 7:15. They were showing a rainbow. And at 7:30 p.m., 22 flew off towards the office. So, and we didn't see him again. But they did show a spoonbill that was hunting in the water, skimming. That was kind of cool looking. I wish 22 had been there. He probably would have gone after that spoonbill. That brings us to Friday, 6:21 a.m. 22 returns to the nest tree. At 7:33 a.m., 22 makes a couple attempts to catch some kind of waterfowl bird in the pond. And I tell you, I thought he was going to make his first catch. The first attempt, that bird went underwater at the very last second that it could have. And 22 missed. He may have even got a feather or two on that one. And then the second attempt wasn't as close. But then the waterfowl flew off, and you could see him clearly chase after it. He does need to be careful wasting energy on some of this kind of stuff. And then at 4:30 it started raining, and it rained good heavy rain, and there was some thunder that scared him and the horses during this rain event. But he was around the nest site again, pretty much so all day Friday. Basically, he's there either at the pond, the office oak. There's like an overhang, low branches that overhang the pond. He likes that. There was a stump not too far from the pond that he was at. That's when the lightning and thunder hit, scared him, and he flew off into the office oak. But he pretty much so is getting soaked at 6:13 up in the attic perch. And then at 6:45 he flies off in the rain, and he doesn't come back the rest of the day. I was surprised he flew off in the heavy rain. And then that brings us to Saturday, 5:27. We don't see 22 all morning. I was getting a little worried. But at 12:39 p.m., he flies into the nest tree, into the attic, and is being vocal. Then at 1:10 p.m., he threw up some pellets, and looks like maybe some of that pieces of wood he had swallowed. The reason they do that is it helps they eat roughage occasionally. I'm told it helps their digestion. How, I don't know, but it does. Probably helps bind to with the pellet in some kind of way that they end up throwing up. And then he's kind of off the nest tree for a while, then he comes back at 2:25. He's being kind of vocal. Then at 4:36 p.m., M15 and an intruder returned to the nest with a squirrel. 22 either got knocked off the nest or left the nest as the two of them flew in. He goes to the ground. M15 and the intruder also leave the nest. M15 went to the front pines. The intruder kind of circled around and flew back into the nest tree lower branches. And 22 flew over to the front right snag tree. And then at 4:49, M15 flew back to the nest. And he was kind of guarding the squirrel. 22 flew to the nest tree by the intruder. But she didn't leave. She kind of looked at him like, really, what do you think you're going to do? But then at 4:51, he flew up to the nest, and he got the prey from M15. And it looked like to me the intruder flew up there and tried to steal it from him. But you know our 22, he just mantled and blocked, and that intruder didn't realize what it was getting into with our 22, and he keeps that prey. So M15 and the intruder fly off, and 22 settles down and eats. Then at 5:10 p.m., M15 returned to the nest tree, just kind of watching over 22 while he ate. After he eats, he goes down to the pond and he drinks and he plays around. And the last time they showed him, he was up in the office. So he still looks good. He's still hanging around the nest site. He's not leaving. He was here at the nest site more this week probably than he's been the past couple of weeks as far as total time spent there. So we'll see what happens with him next week. We'll see how much time he spends, how much time we get to see him. At this point, it's just a privilege to keep seeing him. So let's just talk a little bit about Angel and Tom real quick. Wow. Is that little hawklet getting big? And are they still bringing all kinds of prey in, from lizards to rabbits, squirrels, chipmunks, groundhogs, birds, all different types, from baby blue jays to baby mockingbirds. You name it, they're catching it and bringing it in. that little hawklet's looking really good. He's already mantled a couple of times. He's already swallowed down whole small mice. He's just looking fantastic, y'all. I cannot believe how big he's already gotten in this amount of time. But it just shows when there's just one baby, you know, that they do grow pretty fast. So. And it's also not near the time investment in a hawk nest as there in a bald eagle's nest. So. Well, that's going to do it for this week, y'all. If you like the video, please leave a like. Please subscribe. Leave me a comment. We'll see you next week. I hope you enjoy this video. We'll see you on the next ride. Y'all have a good one. See you next week. Take care.